Welcome to the Directing Animation Livecast with Scott Weiser, currently near a crossroads. Will I continue directing at Spacestation Animation, which I'm absolutely loving? Will one of my 10 feature film pitches get the green light, which has already happened many times? Or will both of these dreams collide? Wherever the road may lead, I remain committed to mastering the art of telling deeply meaningful stories. Today, my guest is my good friend Adam Sidwell, and he seems to be caught up in virtual reality, so I'll just give an intro about him. But he has worked on such films as Tron and King Kong and Speed Racer, and the list goes on and on and on, but he's also started a publishing company. Just like me, he wanted to self-publish, but his turned into a whole publishing company, which is awesome. And he also has founded the company Future House Studios, which has, more than 10 times growth in the past year, has been incredibly inspiring. And welcome to the show. Is there anything you'd like to add, Adam?
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me on the show, Scott. Really appreciate it. Good to be here. Yeah, I started my career in visual effects and animation at Digital Domain, and was working on the movie iRobot, and then went on to Weta and Industrial Light and Magic, and ran the gamut of the studios, making all the cool IPs that are out there, that chasing everyone that I could get, trying to always get on the next coolest movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what we've always been trying to do the entire career. So, you were specifically a character TD, right?
That's correct. So I started out my career as a pipeline TD. Actually, I was writing tools. Back then, it was in Mel and Tickle and weird languages that we don't even use anymore. And now all those things are in Python, and so it's really. But that really segues well into being a character TD, because we write a lot of scripts and code to get those characters built and working, and it's really fun because the way that code works, and when you become a coder, it like reformats your brain to think in a certain way and to think very logically and to have parts fit together, and that's really informed my storytelling in a lot of ways. It's funny because actually just this last week I was writing an adventure game, a text-based adventure game in Python, and it was just so fun, just for the fun of it, right? But it helps you think about like how to structure your stories and where they're going, and it informs that.
Yeah, that's cool. And I thought you were specifically doing rigging, but you were doing more coding, like coding into rigging, or?
So actually rigging was a huge part of it. So a lot of riggers on feature films are coders as well, because you component parts to put together your rig, and it's such a part of the pipeline. And so my job was to so first year was almost completely pipeline TD stuff, and then there was a little bit of rigging thrown in. It was just kind of like, they're like, you're technical, you're junior, we don't know what you do, just go do it, right? And
go get to work.
Just go, well, we're going to tell you what to do, right? We need this and this, and you're going to work on stuff, and we're going to kind of morph you to what we need. And then the second year, when I left Digital Domain to go to Weta, it was completely all character TD stuff. I was building characters, creatures, digital doubles, vehicles. I built all 36 cars in the New York scene in King Kong. There was a lot of them there, and that was all code based, because I was writing scripts to use like repeat components so that I wouldn't have to rebuild every car with the same wheels and suspension chassis, all sorts of those things. So
and I've noticed lots of great riggers do that. And actually, our next guest is specifically a modeler rigger who started Studio Zubu. His name is Stephen Kendall, and we'll get more into that kind of in detail. What I'm more interested in today is like your companies, especially Future House Studios. A lot of my listeners are wanting to start studios, and they're wanting to know kind of the ins and outs and how you went about that. So let's talk about that, just your journey.
Let's do it
on that.
Okay. Well, I think part of it goes back a ways to, just being an entrepreneur. And I think being an entrepreneur is also, very creative. It
is creative.
It's super creative. Like, that, right? Like you
just
make something out of nothing. Right. And so I wanted to make something, and I had nothing. and it was my creative forces that drove me. And then somebody later on said, "Oh, you're an entrepreneur," and I go, "Oh, I guess I am."
Yeah.
So I'm a creative first, right? And what happened is I started off, my first company was Future House Publishing, which is a science fiction, fantasy, and middle grade publishing company. We do adventure stories, we do page turners, we worked with a lot of really great authors, and I started by writing the books myself. I started with one of my titles, and that came out, and I figured out how to market it, how to then scale up a team to actually get people to want to work for you, which is means you have to pay them, right? And
You do.
have money to pay them, and you have to figure out how to put all these parts together. You have to register your LLC, and you have to do taxes and things like that. And so
that's the funnest part, is the taxes.
The funnest part, right? Like there's a whole structure to having companies,
Yeah.
and then being able to launch them in this creative way that they scale and multiply and make what you're making, bigger and better than it would be if you were just doing it on your own. So, that was really informative to me. And about May 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, someone approached me, a producer I'd worked with before, and I was working at a place called Deep Root Studios, and things were kind of on hiatus. There was a furlough. They were struggling with some funding things, and we had a lot of fun there. Like, worked with a lot of great people, and the client approached me and said, "Hey, I'd really like you to do this, and we'd really like you to. You got guys, right? Like, come bring your guys. Let's go make something, right? And let's go. I need people who are modelers, animators, like riggers, all those things. Can you help us with this?" And I said, "Sure." And so I left my old job, and I talked to my old boss, and we talked through it. And I said, "Hey, look, I'm going to do this. Deep Root's struggling right now, but I'll keep doing the stuff I'm doing for Deep Root, because I was directing game cinematics there."
Yeah,
and
I remember.
Built
That's
up
when I first met you.
That's right. Yeah. And so I was directing the game cinematics, and having the time of my life, and it was really fun, but it was really a struggle because of funding things, and we had gotten this cool crew together, and built up the 3D department, but because there were these struggles, and everybody was on furlough for a while, and it happened before, and I said, what, it looks like it would just make more sense for me to go pursue these other things. And so I did, and I talked to the owner of Deep Root and said, "Hey, you know what, you can still contract with me to do these game cinematics." And he said, "Okay, that sounds great." And so we did. And so I was working. So immediately out of the gate, I had 2 clients. And the first client was Wave XR, which is known for their virtual concerts. And so we were creating a lot of content for Unity, content. We're just doing blend shapes, modeling. Then it became rigging. Then it became motion capture cleanup. And then it became concept art. And then it became storyboarding. And then it became like full on, support, Unity tool writing and pipeline support.
Yeah.
And so they've been a fantastic client. And with those 2 clients, we were off to the races.
Yeah. And then I got a call in January 2021 from you, and you said, "Hey, you want to come do this little simple animated intro sequence for the film called Waterman?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And you're like, the style is super simple. And then I remember that just a little bit in, it was 3 times the detail within a couple weeks.
Times the detail. It was, that, and it's funny. So Scott, I love that you say that, right? Because I was looking at it. It debuted. It's going all over these film festivals, and I watched it on the big screen this week, and I was like, "This is so far from what the initial spec was." Right?
Yeah. It was 3 weeks, and then it became a 3-month project.
Exactly. It was just like they just kept pushing like the creative and like do more, and we're like, "Hey, you're running out of budget." And we actually, and that's one of the things that you have to think about as like a producer. Like we actually ended up paying for that for them. Like we were in the red, right, to get that, because they pushed so hard. And so you have to have like, whenever you're doing animation and creative endeavors, you have to like have a certain relationship with your clients where you could say, "Hey, look, you've spent all your budget. Like, we can't
Yeah.
just keep working on this, you
Yeah.
know, as much as we love you, as much as we love this project, like, we have to make money, or else, you know, we're gonna have to close our doors next month, right?
Yeah.
It's not fair to do that to us. And so, you know, but it turned out great. And you got to check out Waterman. You see that Jason Momoa is the narrator,
Yeah.
you know, of Aquaman fame, which is perfect for Waterman, right?
Yeah.
Aquaman's
Yeah.
Waterman. And
Exactly.
so, yeah, so Scott's animations were really killer on that. He like took it to the next level. But you remember the water, right? Like,
Yeah, we did
kept
it.
going
We
to the
did
water.
like 10 passes on the water, and then after we were done, we did a new pass on the water.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we did like the final one. I wasn't sure if I liked the other passes once we started to get more and more detail and stuff. And once we did that new pass, it really brought it to a new level, and it was worth the extra.
It looks great. It really
Yeah.
looks great. It really does. And so, you know, that was one of those things. And so, yeah, that was a good project, you know, and that's fun because we've had kind of a saying at Future Houses: we don't say no.
Yeah.
By that I mean, we don't say no when someone comes to us and says, "Hey, do you know how to do this? Can you guys do that?" And we usually sit back for a moment and go, "Yeah, we could do that."
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, or we say, "Give me 5 minutes, let me get back to you." And then we go talk to the team and we say, "Okay, who have we got on this team? You know, look at our skill set. How can we put this together?" And then we come back and we say, "Yeah, we can do it."
Yeah.
So that's been something that's helped with our growth and helped us to, you know, tackle any challenge.
And you also put a business manager in place who does a lot of sales named Kenton, right? And I
Yes.
noticed that he was constantly bringing in new work, and having those multiple projects also made it a little easier for the Waterman project, where you actually had to pay more out of Future House Studios' pocket to get that to the quality you want it to be. But then it's now a showcase piece, right? You can show this is the kind of stuff we can do. So yeah, it's an interesting balance that you've struck there. And then I remember we went right into another project, and it was with a similar client. I remember that client was involved on
Right.
that one, and it
Yeah,
was
that,
much
that's
bigger in scope. It was a documentary that
that's
was going to
pretty
have
scope,
tons of animated sequences in it, right?
right? Which
Uh,
will be really exciting once we can reveal that,
yeah,
you know,
whatever it is, we'll
whatever it is,
reveal it
that thing,
someday.
which we can't say right now. But yes, that well, that was one of the things, right? Is that it was the same client, and it was like 10 times the size,
Yeah, it was
right?
huge. And I remember it was
20
Jacob.
times.
Jacob was like, how much do you think we can get done? And I was like, we need a team. We need to grow a team. So I remember going out and recruiting tons and tons of people and building a team, building a structure for just the 2D animation. So that because Jacob was so buried in so many other things in the project, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was wonderful to kind of help him out with that, build a team, learn about that before I actually went and did some real directing. And
Thanks
yeah,
for doing that, Scott. Like,
oh, it was my pleasure.
that was awesome that you were able to help out on that. Like, it was such a big help.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was the other fun thing about your company is you do all these fun activities to get the company together and to have fun together, and I think that's a super big morale booster
Oh,
for
thank you.
sure.
Yeah, I love it. You know, it's tricky, right? Because we are a virtual studio.
Yeah,
We have offices in Pleasant Grove, Utah. We're like pretty close to where the old Void used to be, if you know the Void,
hmm,
you know, with VR. And then, you know, Epic Games is, you know, just down the street,
yep,
you know, up around the bend. And then there's Avalanche, you know, so this whole ecosystem of studios. And so um you know, what we find is that, okay, we've got this office and it's small. You know, when you were working with us, it was like we had room for 4 desks, like it
yeah,
was just
yeah,
one room, right?
yeah,
We've since moved. We just moved downstairs, which is really nice, and so we got a bigger space, and now we have enough that we have like 6 offices and we can fit a bunch of people in there. But still, like, most everyone is virtual. And
yeah,
so where I'm going with all this is the fact that when you have a virtual team, you know, we have people in Canada, we have people in LA, San Francisco, New York, like Idaho, Tennessee. We've had people in Japan, Brazil,
hmm.
Hungary,
I
and then
think
just,
Italy. I think there was an Italian, I believe.
I'm sure, I
Yeah,
bet
yeah, I
there
remember talking to him.
was. Yeah, you
Yeah,
probably worked with an Italian, right, on the team. So that's what's really fun is you have this virtual studio. And but what it means is that, like, when your only relationship is on Zoom, then you've got to try to get like ways for people to interact more, feel like some camaraderie and closeness.
absolutely. Yeah, and we were in a similar boat for quite a while. Our office that we were in, we were sharing an office at Space Station with a couple other teams there at Space Station, and we now have our own space, so we're now more like a hybrid. But for a while, it really was that same situation, and yeah, we flew people in so that we could have those full team meetings where we were celebrating and really feeling each other's energy out, and that is a huge component. And I really like this hybrid studio idea where people can work remotely, but also there's a space that when they come in, they can work, they can engage with us. There's a desk for them, and it's really an exciting experience for sure.
It's so good. I mean, you've got to have that, like, we'll be like, hey, everyone, there's ice cream cake in the office. Like,
Yeah.
get together, right? Like, come on over. Or we'll have, we're getting together with some of the team today later on. And in every day in the office, there's a small group of people that are nearby. And that energy is really helpful. But then we'll also do the events like you mentioned. Like, we had the Christmas party, and everybody came out, and people flew out from different states, and we got together, and it was really cool because sometimes you're working with somebody for 6 months before you meet them in real life.
Yep.
I always like to do the taller shorter game. Like, so who did you think was taller than you thought in real life, and shorter? Because
I'm always shorter in real life. People are like, you were so tall in my mind. I was like, thanks, I guess, But yeah, for sure, you're definitely taller in real life, I think.
Yeah, the Zoom takes away 10 inches.
Yeah, and to me, it adds something. But yeah, that's really great. And what do you foresee in the future of Future House Studios? Future House Studios, you're obviously looking toward the future.
We were looking to the future. Well, so it's been really amazing. Like, this last year, we grew 10 times, like you mentioned, and it was just wild. Like, we're watching this, we're going, wow, what's going on here? Like, all these projects are coming in, we're doing all these things. And so right now we're really focused we're a metaverse creation company, and
that's really your focus. We've got to shout out the Bieber concert. You didn't even mention that, but you did the Bieber concert, right? The big Justin Bieber concert was a big deal.
That's right. Well, so that was actually, and that was our first client, Wave, right? Is like, they came to us, but the first concert we did was John Legend and The Weeknd.
That's cool.
The Weeknd was cool, right? Like, I love that concert. Like, going back to, like, just watching it, I'm like, I love the style. I love everything that the director did with that, and that Wave did with that, and that we got to jump in with that. And then it just kept getting bigger and bigger, our roles in these concerts. And so Bieber concert was in November, and that was huge. I mean, we had like 20 plus artists on there working on it with Wave, and Wave's got all this cool interactive setup, this whole platform that they have. And, we help supply, anything from like lighting and effects to modeling to rigging to, all the way back to concepting and boarding. Like, we helped board out that whole concert, and
interesting.
It was really fun, right?
Yeah.
And so with that, we've been working on those things, and I use the term metaverse creation company because it just really helps, like, as a catch-all to describe all these different things we do, because we also have a big location-based experience that we did for a client that's coming out soon, hopefully April or so. And that's an Unreal thing that we've been working heavily in Unreal with, and we had another 20 plus artists on that one. Then we have things like Waterman, or things like the next movie that's coming out, like, and I guess I'm lumping those under metaverse, right? Like, it's just kind of like this, it's a catch-all phrase, right? But really, we are finding that most people are coming to us for Unreal and Unity and real-time work, a lot of game dev work. And so I see that's been like laying a foundation for us to build the team, to streamline and everything else. But I keep telling the team right now is that we are evolving to the point where we're ready for our next big thing. And our next big thing is, in development, right? And this is where it's like, okay, what's our thing that we're making?
Your piece of original content, right?
Our piece of original content, right? And so there's a couple things on the horizon, right? Like, we have from Future House Publishing, we have a ton of IP, all the books that we've published and the things that we can turn into our content and our original content. We have, I've got the content that I've written, the books that I've written that, I've optioned for film, right? Like Orson Scott Card had purchased the film rights to, my first book series, Evertaster.
Yeah, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did. And so, and that option, he had it for a couple of years, and that expired.
Mhm.
Really great to work with, but ultimately, like, we didn't get a sale on that. But I think a lot of that, I've learned a lot now about like how to approach that and like how to develop. And it's like, hey, let's do some more concept art, let's do some more sizzle, let's figure out how to position this in the market.
Mhm.
So there's some other things that we're working on too, that is our own original IP. And with that, then I will say there's original IP that's targeted for TV and film, but there's also the original IP that's like, okay, well, what is our thing that we're making that's going to live in the metaverse or in games? And to me, right now there's something very, very interesting happening for us. Is Future House just won an award from Niantic, the makers of Pokemon Go.
Okay.
And
Nice.
this was we were super excited about this. I love Niantic. I played Pokemon Go.
Yeah, it's a super successful game.
It's super successful.
Yeah.
So did you know that for a while Pokemon Go was making like $2 million a day?
Wow.
Like $1 to $2 million a day.
Not surprised.
It's still like that high. Like it's still in that same range, right? Like they're just killing it. Like people are still playing it. I know everyone's like, oh, nobody plays that anymore. That was like, I played it for 3 weeks and I'm done. But there's still a number of dedicated fans who just keep going, right?
Yeah.
And it's enough to like make that game.
And I know them. I know some of them at least.
Yeah, right. Like we work with some. Like it's funny because we'll mention on our team and everyone's like, "Oh, I'm level 49." Like what? I didn't even know you could be level 49 because they just up the levels. Like you can go to 50 now.
Yeah.
And one of the producers on our team is that high. But we were really excited because basically, Niantic had a challenge this winter in AR, and so I love AR, right? Because I came as a creature TD who was putting monsters in visual effects in the real world, like, and we would comp them. You comp them in Nuke into the real world and make them look real. And so that to me was always a passion. And then when AR came out, it was like, wait, we can have creatures and unreal things in the world around us, like in real time. Like you could hold up your phone and they're really there. Like it just opened up the possibilities. And so I was a big, even before Pokemon Go, this was funny. It was like I was developing this concept with AR because I knew about AR. I was like, I'd want to make this adventure game in AR that is basically like, okay, Legend of Zelda meets Pokemon Go, right? What would that look like? What would something like that, an RPG adventure, like how would I go traverse the world on this adventure, and how would it be so compelling that I would climb to a mountaintop to defeat the dragon so that I could take home the flaming sword? Like those are the kinds of things where I love that stuff. And so we actually entered the which was basically almost like a hackathon, which Niantic held over Christmas. It was the Lightship Winter Challenge, and we were using the Lightship platform to develop games, and we developed this cool game called Duel of Wizards. And you can see the video. We'll have to share it.
Was it the one in the backyard?
It's the one in the backyard.
Yeah,
yes.
I saw that video.
Okay, great. Oh yeah. Okay, so basically for everyone at home who's listening, you're shooting fireballs, through your phone, and you're shooting. It's multiplayer. You can bounce those fireballs off the ground and off obstacles, which is really cool. And then you hit others, and then the Lightship has recognition that so it does all the mapping, so you can bounce it off of things, but then also has recognition. So like I'm a wizard who has the power to pull elements from the earth around them, from the world around them. And so if you point your phone and you press a certain button, you grab a tree, you point at a tree, and the vision recognizes that it's a tree. And so it gives you like the tree ball, like the nature ball, and you have like this tree thing, and it shoots out a different kind of fireball. And the same thing with rock. And then you shoot the rock, and that stone shatters and deals extra damage. And then the same thing with sky. You grab a cloud, you point it up to the sky, and you grab clouds out of the sky, and then you could shoot the clouds, and they're like extra fast and do a different kind of damage. So the game was super fun, and we did this over the course of a few short weeks. Like our devs, like they just nailed it, right? And it was way fun. And then we did this funny video called Duel of Wizards, and we submitted that to Niantic for the challenge, and we won. Right?
Good.
So,
that's great.
So yeah, woohoo! Yeah, it was awesome, right? Like so we have all of these there were a lot of entrants, and we won like best in sharing, which is the sharing is the multiplayer facets of Lightship. And so we were working with Lightship, and in Niantic, and now we've had lots of meetings with them as they're discussing, with us, like, okay, well, what do you like about this Lightship SDK? What do So we're actually been invited to. I recorded a little video and they presented it to Niantic in their all hands meeting. And that was super exciting, about what we thought about Lightship and Duel of Wizards and talking about that. And so, the whole company got to see us talk about what we made. And then we're actually invited out in LA to go live in this place called AR House. And AR House is this mansion in Beverly Hills where they are just dedicated to like AR creators. And so it's a secret location and you're only invited, like
I love it.
Special invite only. And so
Yeah.
we're going to send our devs and they're going to be there working with Niantic engineers on like the next big thing and developing things. So what I'm saying is that, really exciting things on the horizon as far as like this augmented reality metaverse, right? That's out there. And what's that going to look like and what can we make out of it?
Cool. Sounds like your job as a studio owner is a lot of business negotiations, meetings, and the creativity comes from developing the overall company rather than being in the pipeline of the process, which is a different sort of creativity. How do you feel about that?
You're right. It's funny because like somebody asked me yesterday, they're like, "Do you miss being on the box?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do." Like I was on the box until about like 6 months ago. I was actually like rigging stuff and like fixing things and like working on some previous stuff, and then it just by the nature of all the things going on, we had to hire people up because I had more things to do, which, like, okay, you got this accounting stuff to do, or you've got these negotiations to do, or you've got to talk to people. I mean, like right now, right? Like spending time on this podcast, for example,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that, right? And so, there was last week when we were at the Silicon Slopes Hall of Fame Awards, right? Like being at places like that and, having those relationships. So I'm spending a lot of time meeting with clients and talking with them. And it's interesting, Scott, because it is different than when you're on the box, but it's a different kind of creativity because like I'll sit down with a client and we'll try to get, in half an hour, I will pitch them some creative idea because they're like, they come to us and they say, well, what can you do? We don't know exactly what to do.
Yeah.
We're not sure. And I said, oh, well, we could do this and this. And I'm just like making up pitches on the fly.
Yeah.
How we could do this stuff in AR, we can do it in, in VR, or we could make some kind of film component, and it's super fun. Right. And so, and then we'll have things like, okay, we're going to AR House. Well, what are we going to make there? And so I sat down with our dev and I said, okay, well, here's the pitch. This is what we want to make and what we want to push toward. And then, so what I try to do is I always have to have like one or two creative projects that maybe are like secretly happening in the background, like that I'm working on, and I'm working on with one or two people. And then, but you really have to bring in like good soups and good creatives to help just run, all the other projects, right? And like make sure they're happening. So we have like, Ryan Bird, for example, he works with us and he's one of our soups. He's awesome. He's part of our leadership team, and he
is awesome.
He just Ryan, right? Because you worked with him on Waterman, right?
Yeah.
So he just takes things and he runs with it, right? And you try to like be as little involved in most things as possible, right? Because you just want to let people own it and be creative. And I might have like one or two comments here or there or something that I have to get involved with as far as relating to the client. But you just want to bring together a team of like super creative people and let them go with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That actually segues right into my next question too, because I wanted to talk about your leadership philosophy. I've been reading the book that's called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and it has been really eye-opening and really inspiring too to see how I can push the direction of Space Station. What's your leadership? Well, at least the animation series that I'm developing now. What is your leadership philosophy?
So my leadership philosophy is kind of akin to hire really good people and then let them do their creative thing that they do best.
Okay.
And if you do that and bring them together, they will all rub off on each other and help each other, and it will become like the sum will become greater than the parts, right?
Yeah.
So when I started the studio, I said, okay, there's two things. I've got to remember that there's has to be time and resources dedicated to business development and all these other things, right? Like
Yeah.
I can't just be on the box all the time, or else there won't be a company.
Yeah.
And the second thing is I want to hire really good talent. Like I don't want to hire just everybody is like fresh out of school because they might not cost as much, right? Like that was just never going to work, right? Like I was only going to do it if I could hire like some of my buddies from Industrial Light and Magic or Weta or Digital Domain. Like I needed to have people of really high caliber,
Yeah.
and people that I worked with at Deeproot, right, that I knew that could handle like top level projects, and that I wouldn't have to be involved in like in a lot of those ways. Like we hire people and we say, we just delegate, like, here, this is it, you run with it, you figure it out, you make it as creative and cool as you want. Like, how do you want this to go, right? And so that's my philosophy, because basically the better people you hire and the more creative you let them be, the easier your life will be.
Yeah.
Try to control every bit of everything, like you'll go crazy. And I noticed that when someone is not a fit for something, like we'll give them a task and they won't quite have the skill set that matches that task. It's like if you try to put a modeler into animation and they're not gelling, right?
Yeah. There's a learning curve there.
there's a learning curve there.
Yeah.
There's definitely a learning curve there, right? And we want to let everybody have a chance to try out different things in the studio. We think that's really important. But we also want to set people up so that they succeed and not fail. And that's really important, because you want to let them do the thing that they're really best at.
Yeah.
And then have them come back to you and say, okay, well, I also want to do this thing, right? Like I do want to be an animator someday, right? And we say, okay, well then let's have you try that out in a certain area where it's safe, not where you have this looming deadline where it has to be done next week.
Yeah. We've been doing very, very similar things. We have one in particular that he's a really good generalist, and he wanted to animate. And so the first time we gave him a shot that, it crept up until the end, and that was stressful and very difficult for him. So we're like, we'll give you a shot that's due way down the road that you can just start working on now, and then once we get to that point, hopefully you'll be ready to finish it. We have another that is just so enthusiastic. He wants to be part of everything going on in the studio. And with that one, we're like, you really need to focus. You've got to build your trunk before you branch out. You've really got to have a solid skill set in one area, and then you'll know better how to learn the next area and whatnot. So, yeah.
Well, and the supervisors are really good at at Future House. The supervisors are really good at fostering those talents and like helping bring those out. And so they're, I think, very honed in on identifying like what people's skill sets are, because when you're fresh and new, like let's say you've graduated from Anim school, or you're fresh out of college and you're so excited, and you might not know what you want to do yet, right? Like you might be still playing through the different areas in the different playgrounds and developing what your skills are. But you're right, it's helpful when somebody picks you out and says, okay, here's your trunk, let's start there, and we got to get you really good at least one thing first to start out with. Like, is it character rigging? Is it modeling? Is it textures? Is it concept? Like, let's get you really good at that thing, and then you'll have something to contribute, right? Because basically for a studio to work, everybody has to have something really solid they can contribute. And it's heartbreaking sometimes when you sit down with somebody and you say, hey, look, you aren't contributing. Your stuff is not up to speed, or it's not done on time. And then we try to work with them and say, hey, let's have you tweak this, or how can we help you, or what's going on? But with the rate of production and the demands that clients bring upon you, sometimes there's just not enough time, and sometimes you have to let those people go, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really sad thing. But that really only happens usually when someone is like sitting on something. Like you give them a model, like we've had this happen before. We give somebody a model, and then 2 weeks later we check in. We're checking in every day. How's it going? Oh, it's doing great. It's doing great, but we haven't seen anything yet. And we're just like trusting that they're running with it. And 2 weeks later it's due, and we're like, hey, where is it? And they're like, oh, here you go. And you put it in, and it's like totally not optimized, or it's broken, or it looks bad, or just all those things. And you're like, we just lost 2 weeks, and now we have to go tell the client that this isn't done, right? And then it's egg on your face. And so for all you animators and modelers or artists out there who are listening, think about how you can like really hone your skills so that you can contribute quality on-time work. Because that's going to help your career flourish, and that's what's going to help. I mean, it goes like this. Like we just had a staffing meeting, and one of our artists, he's just killing it, right? And he's doing so well. He's a concept artist and a modeler, and staff was like, the soups were basically fighting over him. They're like, no, I want him on my project. No, I want him on my project.
Yeah.
You want to be that guy, right? You want to be that person that the supervisors like really want you on their project because they know that you can deliver quality and you can do it fast.
Another note on that is that when you're working alone or you're a student, I mean, there's a certain amount of momentum there, but when you're in a studio, you have the ability, because there's so many talented people around you, to really like double, triple, quadruple that momentum just by getting all of their eyes on your stuff and really picking their brains about their process and figuring out their tool and trick about how they get that thing done just a little bit faster. And that's really an opportunity too. So once you're in that studio, really like, don't think I've made it, especially not in this industry. Like this industry has a high turnover rate in several different jobs, and it's really hard to find a staff position. The people who find a staff position are those who every single opportunity that seemed maybe like a little opportunity, they turn it into a huge opportunity. And that's the approach you should use for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, because you don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, because we found that, especially in the virtual world, sometimes new artists, they'll be like struggling with something. And they're afraid to ask, right? Because they're just started. And I remember being that way. I remember being afraid to ask. And there's a little bit of like understanding of like when you can ask, who you should ask, when you should like, figure it out yourself. And you'll get a cadence for that. But your supervisor or your lead is someone that is like a go-to that hopefully you can ask, and they'll help you, right? They'll give you tips and tricks. They'll help you along the way. It's just they only have so much time every day to do that, right?
Yeah. So if you're asking them repeatedly throughout the day, that's probably not wise. But if you're asking people around you who are less busy and maybe you're less reliant on them, but they're around you, you can ask those people first for the general feedback, and then when you're ready to show the supervisor, show them. But again, like you don't want to wait 2 weeks.
You don't want to wait 2 weeks.
You want to have certain checkpoints. So you're like, okay, I've worked on this for 1 day, 2 days, time to show them, get the feedback. Okay, now we need to adjust and kind of switch, our method or whatever, and move toward what the main vision is of it or whatnot. But yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why you have the dailies, right? It's like, because you've got to review every day and you want to show progress from day to day. There's nothing more frustrating for a studio head or a lead when you're showing up to dailies either with nothing to show or it looks the same day after day after day. And that's happened before. And then as a lead have to sit down and I have to give a ton of notes. And then I feel like those notes aren't being executed on day after day after day. And I'm like repeating myself. Then that's when you know that someone isn't going to work. Right.
Yeah.
Because if you've taken an hour out of your day to give them all the notes and help them walk through it, and then they look through it and they're not getting those improvements fast enough, or there's not significant change. If it looks the same, 3 days in a row, there's a problem. And in fact, 2 days in a row, like usually you should show any sort of small progress. And I think this also is wise, like when we're talking about IP development too. If you're working on your thing, Scott, I know you're working on all your pitches, right? You should have somebody, and it doesn't have to be, public to the world, but you should have somebody that you can show things to incrementally.
Yep.
Because you want to get a reaction. You want to say, okay, is this joke landing? Is this character design funny? Is this storyboard making sense? Is this theme intriguing? And the first person you go to might they might not appreciate that, or they might not care, or they might not be interested. But the next person might. Like, you want to find the people that, they understand your kind of humor, and that's the base you build from. And then you see if you can springboard eventually to people you don't know, right? And if you get someone who you don't know to appreciate what you're making, then that you've got something on your hands that can resonate with people.
Okay, yeah, that's good advice. So our last question that we always ask is the Get Wiser moment. It is a deep question, so take your time. We have 5 minutes to answer, or more if you need to go more. The question is, if my goal is to get the deepest... No, let me start again. If my goal is to get the highest clarity of truth into a story, what approach would you recommend?
The highest clarity of truth into a story.
Mm-hmm.
What I would recommend is that you have to understand truth yourself first.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I go about doing that is by writing. And I'm writing not necessarily for anybody else, but I'm writing for myself in a journal, and I'm writing every day just a little bit to discover truth.
Yeah.
Those things there's almost like this imaginary audience that I have is like, okay, someday, after I'm dead and gone, there's a group of people who go, for some reason, they think I'm cool and they want to discover what I had to say about something.
Mm-hmm.
And they go back to my archives and they're digging through it, right? Like, what are those things that you're telling those people about truth and about life and about, the eternities and about everything in the world around us? Mm-hmm. And you have to understand that yourself. And so for me, writing is the way to discover that.
Yeah.
And whenever I want to launch,
you and I are very similar in that way.
We're very similar, right?
Yeah.
Like we've got to find that truth. And so I think writing is such an amazing process, and it was an amazing invention for the human race.
Oh,
in
yeah.
fact, it was hieroglyphs or cave drawings on a wall, because what it did is it allowed people to achieve a clarity of thought. Mm-hmm. Because you write something down and you look at it and you say, oh, that's not right. And you use the word but, and then you clarify that, and then you clarify that, and you keep going until you've honed in on a thought that makes sense. And that process has been huge, I think, for the great writers throughout history. I think this is what helped launch the Renaissance, right? This is what helped coalesce civilization. Like, you look at like the Bible, for example, right? The Bible was like the first point. It was one of the great points. I mean, there's so many points, right? Back to Sumeria and things where people started writing things down, but it was a book of culture coalesced and preserved that people would go back to, and it helped transfer thought about civilization and about how people live and how people should live or shouldn't live. Mm-hmm. And those kinds of things, like whatever literature it is, and all the great works of Shakespeare and all the great works that we're experiencing now, we look at those and we see different people's perspective, and we find things that will resonate with us and that won't resonate with us.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think to find that great clarity of truth is for us to put something down on paper. Now, if I'm going to launch a story, I might have a story where I'm like, okay, this is a really cool setting, and here's some cool characters. But for me, I can never get excited about a story until I figure out what the thematic truth is behind it that I care about and that I'm interested in writing about. And then that story is interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. And the Bible is actually the perfect thing to bring up. I listened to somebody who, I don't even know if they really believe in like the spiritual components behind the Bible, but they were talking about the Bible as like this bedrock. It was the first book really published in the way that we know publishing today, and all the books are really kind of built on that. You can't really throw that thing out as something that you completely disregard, because even like no matter what your belief is, if it's Hinduism, if it's atheism, if it's, whatever your belief is, it's really built on that, if it's in writing. And so, yeah, you really need to kind of reverence that a little bit. Just
idea of pages, like bound in a book that you can hand off to somebody, and then they can interpret what was said, and then you can talk about it afterward. Like, that concept of a book is incredible. And like that's why, that it being one of the first is why it's been preserved for so long. Yeah. And it's helped, those kinds of things, like, they help shape the human race.
Yes, they do. And it's not just the pages and the binding and the words on it, right? It's the messages inside of it. It's this idea that Cain killed his brother Abel. And what does that mean? What does that mean for us? And there are different interesting things that, again, whether you believe the opposite or not of what the Bible teaches, your belief is kind of hinging on that. So to be able to have an overall understanding of truth, that's really kind of a central point you go to, is that, and then you can go to other things. But I often like to say that the truth is found where all of the experiences of the human race overlap. Yeah. And it's called the collective unconscious or whatnot. And it began with the Bible. It's just a fascinating thing. And yeah.
Well, think about all the other civilizations that existed at the time, the same time as the Israelites, and everything that was going on. Many of them are lost to memory. Yeah. Because they didn't have the written form. And
and we do have the Tale of Gilgamesh. I have to backtrack a little bit. The Tale of Gilgamesh is written on a stone.
Yes.
Yes. That does date back past the Bible. But again, respect that the Tale of Gilgamesh.
The reason we know about the Sumerians is because of those written things that were preserved in the Tale of Gilgamesh. And by the way, I love that. Right? I love Enkidu and the story of the flood, and I think his name is Utnapishtim, the far away, where Gilgamesh travels across the sea to meet him, to hear about the origins of life and death. And he wants to know how to bring Enkidu back to life, right? Mm-hmm. And just like, this stuff is so cool, and it resonates with you. And it was because it was written down, right? And because it was preserved in those forms, that it launched this common ground for us to all have this discussion about, okay, what is humanity and how do we build civilization? Because remember, it was pretty wild back then, right? Mm-hmm. Like, there was, you didn't have a city, and there weren't rules set up, and there wasn't safety, there wasn't exchange of goods. Like, you just had so many uncertainties, and the written form helped coalesce that into something that people could agree upon or disagree with. Mm-hmm. But then that built civilization, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's why we're storytellers. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, awesome. Great discussion. Thank you so much for being on this show. If people want to follow you, where's the best place to look? I think I put your Instagram down in the show notes. And,
come check me out. Adam Glendon Sidwell on Instagram. You can follow Future House Studios on Instagram or LinkedIn.
Yep. And the Future House website is also down in the show notes. So
yes, and definitely, if you're an animator or a modeler or a producer or CG supervisor or an Unreal tech artist, hit us up. We need to hire all of those right now. We're in our busy season, so come find us on LinkedIn or send us an email, and we'll have recruiting get in touch with you.
Sounds great. And until next time, I hope we all get a little wiser. Thank you for watching the Directing Animation Livecast, hosted by Scott Weiser, audio version edited by Kiera Horowitz, copyright Scott Weiser LLC 2022.